Hello everyone. My name is Ricardo. I am a level artist. I've worked most recently on Batman Arkham Origins as well as Batman Arkham Origins Initiation DLC. I've also been a teacher and I love video games and 3D art, and I'm going to show you a quick tutorial today about how to work on modular pieces as well as setting up your Photoshop into modules so that you can better recycle, or I should say reuse, the parts of your texture so you don't have to make unique textures for everything. So before we jump into it, I'm going to be working from a concept art that I found online by an artist, David Levy. This is a concept art from Prince of Persia 3. So it might be from an older game, but it's going to demonstrate the functionality of the tutorial. So before I jump into any actual modeling or texturing, I like to take a look at the concept art and I like to see what I'm working with. I'm a type of person who really likes to break down the scene first to see how, in some ways, how little I have to do to get as much as I can later on. Since I didn't really take since I didn't really look at the scene before, I'm going to take a look at it with you now, and we're going to take a look at what we can reuse. So for example, one of the things that stands out to me is the wood. In the upper areas, you can see that there is a lot of wood being reused. There's even this scaffolding, I guess, some kind of structure here. There's wood. There's a ladder that could very well be made out of wood or some other material. And then you have the big door in the middle. Now, the funny thing is, the door is probably the part of all of this that I'll ignore the most, because this method makes you reuse a lot of the textures. There can be moments where your texture looks like you're reusing it, like you're actually doing what it is that we're going to be doing. Because in 3D and in video games especially, you're trying to fake as much as you can. You're trying to make the player or the viewer believe that you're creating these brand new textures, that you're working from scratch for everything. But the irony is that most of this stuff will be reused, especially when everything looks very homogenic. So the door is probably the area that I will end up doing a unique texture for. The other parts I see are the stone pillars to the left and the right of the door. I see that they're pretty similar to the rest of the environment, so that would probably be a great place to have that modularities come up. And finally, I see bits and pieces of metal here and there. There aren't too many, and they're fairly small. So the smaller the item, the easier it is going to be for you to reuse the pieces, to reuse textures, to basically cheat your way through making certain details in the environment without wasting too much time. The idea of all this is time and resources. Not every engine will allow for what it is that I'm trying to do here, and not every pipeline will want you to work this way too. So I'm just going to give you some tools that you can use, and hopefully it'll help you in some way set up your texture sheet better, understand modeling a little bit easier, and move forward from there. So I've taken the liberties of getting a few textures that I want to work with that I feel that are easily translatable to the image that we saw. So I won't waste too much time in trying to edit the textures or to try to make them different. I will be honest, I took them straight from the internet. I'm going to use them like this for the purposes of this tutorial, but later on I will end up modifying them and making them my own. So the first part that I want to start to work with is the wood. Why? Just because it's the easiest part for me to understand in the picture. So I will drop it into my Photoshop. Before I get started in my Photoshop, I'm working with a 2048 by 2048. That's just because it helps me divide up my grids evenly. I divide my grid lines. If you check in the preferences, you can set up your guides and grids. I set up my grid to have a line at every 256 pixels. So that way I know that every 4 is 1048 1024, sorry, every 4 across and every 4 down. So I can work in a 1024 by 1024 square, or I can spread across to 2048 by 2048. Since we are going to be using this texture sheet for many pieces, I want to make sure to maximize the detail but minimize the resources that it would impact on the engine. Because the other, well, you'll slowly learn that everything you do in 3D is about give and take. How much do I have to give before I can get, before I can shortcut something else? In some ways, people use textures and try to use texture softwares to make normal maps. Well, that is a method that does work. So what you're saving is you're saving the time it would take you to do a high poly model in ZBrush or in 3ds Max. But at the same time, what you're giving up is that ability to make something unique and to make something different. So I've just gone and pasted the wood into my grid, and I want to make sure that this wood is taking up a good amount of the space, since in the concept art the wood does take up a lot of the room, and I want to make sure that it's the one that has a lot of detail and that it's not being minimized too much. So let's take a look at what I can do with the wood here. I'm going to try to fit it into a slightly smaller than 1024. So basically I'm across 4 and I'm down 3. But the other thing that I want to show you in this tutorial is how to set up a texture sheet such that your modules will be able to reuse, you'll be able to reuse them pretty much anywhere, not just in this scene. So one of the methods I've learned in doing so is by making the textures go completely left to right and make them tileable. In my case, I don't need to make them tileable because the way the scene is set up, there's a lot of breaks between the two textures, and that any seams between this end here and this end will probably be invisible, or I'll find a way to hide them. So I want to see how much of this wood I can stretch across without it becoming too stretchy. So if you take a look here, I stretched the texture that I was working with all the way across, and I can see that there's just too much stretch going on. So now I'm going to try to work it back and to see how much I can get away with going this way. I mean, it might not be that much after all. It might just be me having to copy paste this texture 2 times. And in this case, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. So I'm just going to click and drag it across. How I did that was I held Shift and Alt and grabbed my texture and moved my mouse across to the right. That way, I didn't have to do any copy pasting and try to repost everything. At the same time, if you didn't notice what I was doing before, I clicked on the snap such that my textures will snap to my grid lines. Now, right now that's really helpful, but there comes times when I want to take that off because it just gets in the way. So now if I look at my textures, I moved it across, but there's this weird seam in between them. And I want to try to minimize as much as I can in the middle of the texture, since the ends of the texture will be the ones where the end of the model will meet. That won't be so bad. But in the middle of the texture, that'll be very obvious if I leave it here. So one of the ways that you can go around fixing those is by flipping it horizontally. So you can see just by doing that, a lot of these seams matched up, and it's pretty seamless here. I mean, you can see that there is clear mirroring. So one way I'll use to get rid of that mirroring is simply by merging these layers and using the spot healing brush. I will try to go across the middle area to see what happens. I mean, sometimes you get great results like this, sometimes you don't. So I'm just quickly checking. Yeah, it's not that bad. The idea is just to cut some of that symmetry. You don't have to make it 100% perfect, but you want to make it look almost as though this is one large piece of wood that somehow was created or manufactured. Um, a lot of what you're going to be doing in 3D is trying to sell what it is you're doing. So when I say sell, I mean you're just trying to make it believable. You're not trying to convey anything more than that. You're just trying to make somebody look at your work, and when they look at it, they can, they can believe it. They really see that there's something happening there, that that the work you did was unique, and that you used some techniques that were high level, but in reality you just used some tricks here and there, and you just faked it. So I'm just trying to see. I don't want to spend too much time on that because that's not the focus of this tutorial. I just set this up like this. So for now, this is satisfying to me. It doesn't look too bad. Obviously, I will go back and I will fix it up to make sure that that a lot of the seams are gone, and that it feels more unique. I could even move parts of the boards here by cutting them and putting them in other areas. But that's not the important part. So I have my wood set up. So we can move on now to one of the other parts of the concept art. Another part I want to move on to is the pillars. So the pillars have two interesting things on them. They have these strips here, and they have these bricks. So I'm going to try a method of ignoring the, well, I guess the paint that they put on. I will ignore the paint, and I will work simply with the concrete or the plaster, as well as the blocks. By doing that, I'm doing something. I'm sort of foreshadowing what it is I want to do with the scene, or how I can reuse some parts. Because if I ended up putting these strips or the paint lines on the texture, what happens later on is, if ever I want to reuse my texture sheet and build something else, then those lines will always be there, or those paint borders. So I don't want to necessarily limit myself right now. If push comes to shove and I realize that I do need to incorporate those into my final texture, then I will, and I'll just I'll modify the texture. But going forward this way, it's easier to add those details later on. So here I have just a simple brick, I guess, monument. I'm gonna just grab the parts that I want, and I will start labeling my folders. So I like to work with labels on almost anything except for the textures themselves. I like to label the folders they're in, just because it's easier for me to keep track of the entire work afterwards. And also, I find naming all of these textures one by one is just a really long process for only a small amount of gain. So here I have the bottom part, if you will, of the pillar. And again, I'm going to try to always work fully from left to right, because I want to try to maximize the abilities to reuse these textures later on, and also it helps me it makes my unwraps much easier after, and I'll show you what I mean when I get there. So here we have the pillar, and this is another plaster texture I found, just making sure that that's right. Sure, let's take that one. I mean, this is like it's a very hands-on approach to texturing that I like to take, where I don't know exactly what's going to work out. I don't know exactly how everything is going to look and feel until I get it out there, and then if I have to do modifications afterwards, I will, and that's just the way I like to treat it. I don't like to treat texturing and especially texturing. I don't like to treat it very systematically or very mechanically, just because I find that I have a little bit more freedom when I can start to try other things, and I don't get into a rut where I feel like I'm always repeating the same processes and I'm getting bored. So let me take a look at the concept art. So we have bricks at the bottom, we have stone at the top, Now it's a question of blending these two items to make basically a pillar. Now that I think about it, I actually don't need to make them. Let me see here. This part. No, I think I will. I think I will blend them in just because it'll help me with the later steps. So I will rotate that. So now you're going to look at these two things and you're going to say, well, they don't blend together. Well, the colors, they don't blend. That's for sure. And I don't want to spend too much time on trying to make the colors blend here. But I will definitely make that happen afterwards. And one of the ways that the concept art is hiding the seam is by having this strip here. So later on, when I do in fact make that strip, I will be able to hide this seam a little bit better. But the idea now is just to match the colors, and I don't want to spend too much time. I'll just see if I can get something quickly. Nope, that's fine. So I'm just hitting some hotkeys here, like Control B brings up my color balance, and that's not that bad. And Control U brings up my hue and saturation. Those are the two I probably end up using the most to make colors blend. Maybe even this one. Okay, so I'll just leave it at that for now. You'll understand later on how this all comes together, and that the colors right now, they don't make a difference because it's just to set up the texture sheet. So the next thing I'm going to look at is this like extruded part of the pillar, which I will also interpret as this block down here as one of the supports. So for that, I'm going to grab this texture here. Now this one seems kind of noisy for now, but I'll be able to work with it after. So let's type concrete. Okay, so let's see what we can get out of this one now. So the idea is I always want to continue working from left to right, just because, like I said, the unwraps later are going to be much easier to manage. Let's see what I can do. So I'm just copy pasting them from left to right completely. Let me see. Yeah, so that should be fine. So I'm going to do the same technique I did with the wood, where I merged all the layers, and then I hit the healing brush, and then I try to draw over the seams and see what kind of effect it gives. It's not that terrible. The idea is you just don't want any hard seams, just because it's going to be a little easier to fix afterwards. And again, the same thing with the other textures is that I don't want to spend too much time trying to fix it. So I just realized that maybe I should fix these textures such that they go completely left to right, like I was mentioning to you before, because I will run into some troubles. So I'm just going to do the same method I did before, just to give me something to work with here. And then these ones are not so bad because they're big blocks, and that the blocks are generally you can kind of play around with cinder blocks because it's sometimes hard to interpret how they're placed. So whenever I'm doing a project like this, or I'm working with a texture like this, because I have experience with this method before, I kind of see what I need to be doing in my modeling, because I didn't mention it before, but one of the things you're going to you're going to have to do when you work in this method is you're going to end up having to model a little bit more. And when I say model, I mean your low poly will have to probably have some form of chamfer edges if you want to have a smooth feel. You're going to have probably a few more areas where you add polys where you could have originally baked them in. For the simple fact that this method is great for reusing textures, but when it comes to baking edges and putting in unique details, like I mentioned before, this is not the method where you're going to put in those unique details. This is really a broad strokes approach where you end up working with some textures, and you end up just being able to almost block everything out, but in such a way that it becomes very usable. So the blocking out itself is going to be very helpful for you later on to see how your colors match, see everything comes together, but at the same time, it helps you save a few steps. Okay, so the last thing I want to add is some metal, because I've seen a lot of metal in the scenes, like I mentioned before. There's a few little details here and there that I know having metal on my texture sheet will become very useful later on. So let's just put that in there. Some metal. And let's see what we can do. So again, it can be very crude the way you apply these textures for the simple fact that a lot of the times this is not going to be the focal point of your scene. These are big picture things. These are levels. How do I say this? They're big picture things. They're so big that you see them as a whole, but you don't see them as necessarily a unique piece, which is why I want to spend more time on the door, and I even want to spend some more time on some other things. So the way this texture sheet came out, I don't know how it's going to work yet, but based on my experience, it's going to be really helpful to have it set up like this. So again, the wood takes up the most of the room because most of the scene is big pieces of wood that if you don't take the time to give them enough resolution, then they may not come out the way you want, especially because the wood is touching parts of the scene that I know will have its own unique texture sheet. I want to make sure that those parts are going to be as high resolution as I can by still using this method. So I'm going to save it out, and I'm going to bring it into Max, and we're going to see how to unwrap it together. So I'm in Max now, and I created a basic block out of the scene. If you remember the concept art, I have these pillars here, the wood up here, and then I basically blocked out the door to give me an idea, give me a sense of space. So what we're going to do now is we're going to apply that texture sheet to these objects, and you're going to see how much quicker it is doing it, starting with the texture sheet built the way we did, versus trying to model first, unwrap after, and then texture accordingly. So the first thing I want you to notice is, let me just isolate this for a second, is this is my pillar. This is my pillar without the base. So it's basically just this part here, from top to bottom. So what you'll notice is that, for one, instead of having the crevice or the crack between the two supporting pieces in the normal map, I put it in the texture, because I know, or sorry, not the texture, in the mesh itself, because I know that I want to be able to reuse that texture sheet as much as I can. I have to model a bit more than I would normally. The same thing with the edges. I chamfered the edges, and that allows for basically giving a roundness to the mesh without having to bake anything in. Now, like I said before, this may not be the method for every production you work on, or for every project you participate in, but this is a good way of understanding the give and take of 3D, of where you can win some time and where you can lose some time or resources. So the pillar is exactly what you would think it is. It's just the front part without the base or without the top. I modeled those separately. So now if I apply the texture to it and view it in the viewport, you'll see that the texture is all over the place. So now when we apply an unwrap to it, we go straight into the unwrap editor, and you're going to see how much quicker it is to unwrap it this way versus trying to fight with it in any other method. So my computer is lagging a touch. So I'm going to change this to map 1, which is our texture sheet, and here is the mesh. So if I hit enter, it basically it applies a plane projection mapping to the mesh. So what I want to do is I actually want to try to peel it, and by peeling it, it will flatten everything as much as it can. And actually, that did a really good job. So let's take a look at what I wanted before. Before, I wanted to have the blocks at the bottom, the cement at the top. So with this method, by separating my texture sheet this way, I may end up having to add a few more segments to my mesh, just so that I can unwrap parts of it separately. Because right now, if I tried to do this, there was no way I can apply one part to the other. So I will have to go and add those segments into the mesh, and once I return, you'll see what it looks like fully unwrapped. I've completed the unwraps on the pillar, the wood platform, as well as the support, the concrete support at the bottom. I even took the time to make one of the wood details that was in the concept art, just to give you an example of the applications of this texture sheet. So, kind of to summarize everything, there really wasn't anything fancy in the unwraps. The only thing you need to do is really just follow your texture sheet and apply the unwraps to the spot where you want to use it. There's really nothing complicated, which is one of the fun things about this method, is that it really gives you the chance to try to explore how much you can do with the texture sheet with so many textures already on it. So the idea of this tutorial was really to show you guys everything that you can do with one texture sheet in a level, and to kind of give you maybe the pros and cons of it. You might be able to see it right away, is that, well, on the pro side, it's really easy to set up. You can just pick whatever textures you find that match your scene, break it down that way, and it's, in a way, it is very systematic for the setup process. So for those of you that like to have a method and to stick to a certain formula in the beginning, this is a great way to get you guys started. And as you see, I didn't really work on my textures, so that's why they may look a little bit weird and that they don't blend well, but that's perfectly normal because I didn't work on the textures. It would be the case with pretty much any method. One of the big cons, though, as you can see, is that I have wood here on the left, and I tried reusing it here on the right, and you can see that they do look okay, but there isn't enough difference between the two woods. This is a good point where I would like to have put maybe some darker wood or maybe some different details on the wood itself. So this is where I'm going to have to maybe come up with either another texture sheet. It could even be the same texture that I'm going to end up doing the door frame on. Just because it's a different color wood, it has a different grain to it. It should make the scene pop. The other thing you're going to notice is that this metal bit here is, well, I mean, it's basic metal. I didn't work on it or anything, but what I want to highlight is that I can't really get any of these screws or these rivets without baking or without modeling, and it always feels wrong to model in rivets like that, just because those will get really heavy for your scene and for the process. So that's another kind of a con to the process. But once you once you figure out the ins and outs, it's not impossible to, kind of dedicate a certain area of the metal part here to have a small bake for rivets or rust or any of that stuff. So it's not impossible. It's just maybe as a first go for somebody trying out this method for the first time, or there's some texture sheets that you try to set up. You don't really know how it's going to play out until you get to down the line and you realize, well, maybe that wasn't the best method to do certain things. So you kind of have to backtrack a bit. So the magic of this system is that because everything is pretty well set up in the Photoshop, you're able to fix things relatively quickly. Should your lead artist or your art director ask you to fix something, it gives you the great chance to make everything in your scene have a certain homogenic look to it. And when I say that, I mean not putting too many different details throughout. I mean, you still want your scene to have things that pop and shine, and things that stand out. But this is a good way of building a base, a good blockout, if you will, of your textures, to get a feel for the color, get a feel for the mood, and it's a lot easier to fix after, because I mean, I didn't show you guys here, but we could have applied a ton of different filters to make sure everything blends properly. We could have applied decals. We could have done a lot of stuff to the texture. I just wanted to show you that setting up a texture sheet to make modules is a great way to save time, save resources, but at the same time you have to know when and how to use it to make sure you're optimizing your resources and tools. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick tutorial on this method. This is just one of the many ways that I use when I build up a scene, and I really try to get the most out of my textures and the most out of my modeling. All right, well, thank you, and have a nice day.